we can't experience our death, what are the ways in which we can approximate that experience? I mean, how do we approximate that in life? And that's what I want when I play live. I mean, and that's what I want when I write these lyrics. That's what I want when I come up with an album. That's what it's like, I mean, I want to know what's on the fucking other side.
I awake Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, I'm Daniel. I'm a singer in Vastum.
And Daniel, I had your bandmate Layla on to talk about Vastum back in 2019. But I'm curious, how would you describe the music of Vastum?
Well, historically, I guess Vastum was what's typically referred to as an old school death metal band that, some people, I think, associated us with this kind of knuckle dragging, like primitive, regressive death metal that has no blast beats. There's another term for it. I can't quite remember what it is.
Like caveman death metal or...
Yeah, that's what it is. Caveman death metal. Yeah. So yeah, that's what people have associated us with. I mean, I think it's changing a bit. I think there's maybe a bit more of a progressiveness underway, maybe, as opposed to the regressive cavemanish style that people might be used to, but I'm not sure. It's in the process of emerging, so I'm not quite sure, where we're headed.
And I should mention that I spoke with you about Acephalix last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I mentioned, I spoke with Layla back in 2019
Mm-hmm.
about Orificial Purge before
Mm-hmm.
that album came out.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, your drummer Chad was on to speak about Vomitous, and your guitarist Shelby was on to speak about Ulthar.
Uh-huh.
So I've got almost a full deck here. I'm just missing your bass player.
Yeah. Colin. Yeah. From Fortress. Yeah. Yeah. Luca, was our longtime bass player, but he, I think, basically during the pandemic, moved away, and he has been focusing on Necrot. So Colin was playing live for us, and we asked him to officially join for this album. And we've known him for a long time, obviously, from Mortuous. But yeah, basically since many of us have been playing metal in the Bay Area.
So when I spoke with Layla, she mentioned that Vastum was actually formed by you and Kyle from Acephalix. Is that more or less right?
Yeah. We were playing in a band called Corpus with RD, who played drums on the first album, and our friend Spencer. And yeah, we found ourselves coinciding with Acephalix's interest in playing death metal. We found ourselves interested in transforming Corpus into a death metal band. I mean, what we were playing at the time was an interesting amalgam of styles. So it was, there's everything from like a crust element, like the UK Sacrilege, to like, songs that had like a big black influence, to like, then like, songs that were very Celtic Frost-esque, but we wanted to play death metal. So we thought Layla would be the perfect person to invite to join the band, and she came up with the name Vastum, and the rest is history. And now, Kyle, he plays in a bunch of bands. He's in Decrepacy now, and Negative Prayer, and a bunch of other bands. But yeah, he was with us for the first two albums.
So Acephalix was already active and recording and playing shows when Corpus started turning into Vastum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to have a second death metal band? What was it about Vastum that you wanted to explore that you felt wasn't right for Acephalix?
Yeah. So Acephalix, which, by the way, for all of the listeners out there, the pronunciation of the band name is multiplicitous. So it's like, some people say Acephalix. We've said Acephalix for many years, but yeah, I think Acephalix is actually the correct pronunciation. So good job.
I think you're the one who actually told me it was Acephalix.
Oh, did I?
Because I used to say Acephalix until until we spoke last year.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sorry, but please go
No,
on.
it's fine. And then I probably said acephalix in that interview, and I said acephalix today, so whatever. But so yeah, when we were playing in acephalix, it started as pretty much like a very punkish death metal band. So I think we wanted to play something that was a little bit more death metal, like in the sense that it had less of a punk element, and maybe something that was a little bit darker and just a little moodier, maybe a bit doomier, and I think that like when Layla and I talked about forming this new band, we also, I think, had a shared interest in exploring some different lyrical themes, even though there's a lot of crossover between the lyrical themes of both bands, because there's a heavy Bataille influence, and there's just a lot of the lyrics are, sort of inspired by philosophical and psychological themes, so, but Layla and I were talking about specifically writing a bit more about eroticism and sexuality and sort of, yeah, like thinking about horror and like, some common death metal tropes through the lens of sexuality.
Almost like a body horror kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And of course, I mean, we found ourselves drawn, which I've been drawn to psychoanalysis for many years, but found ourselves drawn to psychoanalysis because there are some pretty extreme ideas in psychoanalysis about the body and sexuality, and early psychoanalysis, like Freud and Melanie Klein and people like that. And so people, analytic writers who are more Freudian or Kleinian and who are interested in sexuality, they continue to explore some of those ideas, and I find them to be quite suitable for death metal lyrics at times.
And when we last spoke, we spoke a lot about the influence of philosophical writers and the death of God and the influence of philosophy on your lyrics for Acephalix, Acephalix. But for Vastum, are you specifically going into these like Freudian sexual themes?
Well, it's like on the first album, I would say that there wasn't, it's interesting. It's like there are like elements of that, but it's not like I'm writing about Freud or something. There's one song, one of our more popular songs, Enigma of Disgust, is specifically about some ideas from the psychoanalyst Jean Laplanche. And same with, actually, I guess, on Carnal Law, our first album, there's also a song that takes up some kind of Laplanchian ideas, the song Primal Seduction. But that song is also it has a lot of Bataille in it. So the lyrics, they've been, and I tend to like prefer the term eroticism over sexuality, because sexuality can sort of connote like, I don't know, like porn or something, which like
right.
is fine, but it's not really what I'm writing about. It's like I'm writing more about, like Bataille talks about like eroticism as a psychological quest that ascends to the point of death or something like that. And so it's like I'm more interested in it psychologically than I am sort of like the content of specific sexual acts or something like that.
Would you mind speaking a little bit about George Bataille, because I'm definitely not familiar with his work, and I'm sure my listeners who are much like me in the sense that they probably spend a lot of time watching cartoons and listening to caveman death metal. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they'll know who he is either.
Yeah.
But can you tell me a little bit about his work and what drew you to his work?
Yeah. Sure. So he was born in 1897, and he died in the 60s, I think. But he was studying to be a priest before he became, basically like a libertine and writing in this kind of the lineage of the Marquis de Sade, which, because he wrote fiction as well. And so a lot of people have associated his work with the work of Sade. And so there's a big emphasis on transgression, on violence, on things that Sade wrote about quite a bit too. But, I think in part because of his exposure to Catholicism, he was also very interested in religion and specifically Christian mysticism. And so there is this kind of tension in his work between the mystical and the erotic, and ways in which, both of them, despite the fact that they're radically different from each other, can, in a certain sense, resemble each other when they're taken to the extreme, So you might think of an erotic experience as almost religious, or we might think of a religious experience as almost erotic, even though to think in that kind of way is, of course, blasphemous from a religious perspective, and maybe kind of, I don't know, like not particularly exciting from a sexual perspective or something. So he wrote a lot about that, but he also wrote about politics, and he was a very, his scholarly interests were very wide ranging. So although he was trained as a numismatist, which is a specialist in coins, he also wrote quite a bit about anthropology. He was collaborating on a text with the physicist George Ambrosino, which eventually became the book The Accursed Share. So he was very interested in energy and concepts of excess, and thinking a lot about systems and the containment of energy, and ways in which, we can think about that bodily, but we can also think about that socially and economically. And he was fascinated by what happens when, this kind of excess energy can no longer be contained. And I guess, when energy in fact becomes excessive. And so he thought about that in lots of different ways. But in general, I would say that he is a thinker of horror, but also a thinker of, he's an aesthetic theorist. So he thinks a lot about beauty, but also especially the relationship between beauty and affects like disgust or repulsion or things like that. So he's, in that way, he's also very similar to, I think, psychoanalytic thinkers who are interested in the relationship between, like the sublime, or the things that are so incredibly rapturously beautiful that they sort of, or disgusting that they, beauty and disgust, kind of like sexuality and religion, become indistinguishable. It's just, he was interested in what happens when things are taken to the limit. And so that applies to all areas of life and all forms of scholarship. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's a good explanation. And I think you mentioned that you and Layla had discussed Bataille, or had a common interest in Bataille and wanted to explore those themes in Vastum early on.
Yeah. Well, Layla's background is actually in speech pathology, language and speech pathology. So she did graduate work in language and speech pathology, and she's also been, so she has an interest in psychology, and language, but she works at a psychoanalytic institute and is very familiar with psychoanalytic ideas herself. At the time when we formed Vastum, I was the one bringing the bataille. I mean, that was my preoccupation. So she was like, and she thought it was cool, but, she was mostly just like, oh, this is queer. It's weird, like, like I'm down, that was her attitude. And, that's, I think, one of the reasons we got along quite well from the start.
was the interest in Bataille, and why did you feel it was a natural fit for the kind of musical direction that Vastum was going in that was different from Corpus and Acephalix?
Hmm. Well, there's a lot of Bataille in Acephalix, but I mean, I think that I mean, when I first discovered death metal, it actually frightened me, there was actually something unsettling to me about it. When I first heard bands like Morbid Angel, Deicide, especially the satanic bands, but then even just your early earache bands and stuff, there was something that felt, because I was just listening to thrash and punk and hardcore or crossover or whatever. And so there was something about it that had a feel or a mood to it that I think I didn't quite capture, or I didn't feel like we quite captured in Acephalix. So I wanted to try to capture that in Vastum. And I thought that one of the ways to do that is to talk about something that typically death metal bands only sort of write about in a kind of humorous way, or a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, or it's they write about it in a way that's so over the top that it's not actually a psychological quest. You know what I mean? Bataille writes about I'm more interested in something that actually induces some kind of unsettling mood. And that's what I wanted to try to do with Vastum. I don't know if it was successful or how people feel about it, but I thought that I didn't want to just do it by writing over the top, kind of obscene death metal lyrics. I wanted to make it more cerebral. And so Bataille, he is the thinker of eroticism as a psychological quest. I think that was one of the big differences between him and Sade, that Bataille, I think, was trying to answer a much more psychological and actually even more ethical kinds of questions by exploring erotic themes. And so if you look at the demo tape, Carnal Law, because Carnal Law, it's an album, it's our first album, but it really was a demo. On Encyclopedia Metallum, it should say demo, but it says full length, whatever. So on the insert to that cassette cover, there's a lengthy quote about erotic violence and ethics, and it's from this Bataille scholar, Zenip Dirac. I can't quite remember where she's from, but if anybody's interested and they have the demo, they could read that to get a better sense of what I'm trying to say.
But in a nutshell, you felt that this view or this approach to eroticism and Freudian themes is something that fit death metal but wasn't really being explored by other bands, or not being explored in a mature way. Would that be a fair assessment, a fair way of summing it up?
Yeah, it wasn't being explored in a more serious way. Yeah, and I think almost I would say in a more kind of aggressive way, because I think my performance style is pretty aggressive. It's very interactive, and it's about contact. It's about the body, and about an experience, trying to have an experience with people. I don't know, I mean, I like seeing shows, and honestly, if somebody was interacting with, well, it depends on the band, but if somebody was interacting with me in the way that I interact with people and when I perform live, I'd probably go to the back of the room, because I tend not to want to be I'm not, so I understand people who don't really want to have the experience. I want to try to cultivate with them when they see us play live, and they might just stand at the back of the room. That's fine. But I think that there is something very, corporal about the music, about death metal, and about these lyrical themes, and and I think that because it's so bodily, it's also more aggressive. It's also more about has more to do with contact, and I think that the thing that Bataille writes about, when he's saying it's this psychological quest, eroticism, it's like he's interested in like experiences of contact, of bodily contact that results in a kind of impossible experience of death and life. So it's like, that was one of the things he was interested in. It's like we can't experience our death. What are the ways in which we can approximate that experience? How do we approximate that in life? And that's what I want when I play live. And that's what I want when I write these lyrics. That's what I want when I come up with an album. That's what it's like, I want to know what's on the fucking other side. You know what I mean? So it's like, which is unknowable, of course, but it can in some ways be felt. And I think that was, one of his points, and it's felt as a kind of shock or as a kind of something that's unsettling to our minds and bodies. And so I wanted to do that with the lyrics. I wanted to do that with the art. I wanted to do that with the music. I wanted to do that with the performance.
So, having never seen you perform live, can you describe for me what you mean when you say you interact with the crowd? Are you off the stage and are you, are you moving into people? Are you holding people? Are you?
Yeah.
I had the singer from Boy Sets Fire put his head on my chest during one of their songs, which was very odd and kind of jarring and unexpected.
That's funny. I've done that. Like all kinds of contact. I'm just like that as a performer, though. I I don't want to just fucking stand on stage and I don't know, it's I can't really do it. Like I've told myself all right, stay on stage tonight. Like people aren't going to be into it. Like German crowds, not all of them. We've had some that are very receptive, but I can remember a few shows in Germany where people were I don't know, it's like it's culturally different and they're maybe not used to that kind of interaction. But even in the States, it took years, I think, for me to find a way to, it took years to find the optimal space between me and the crowd. And so early on, I was just I was very aggressive in my style. So people would just go to the back of the room, but I was never violent toward people necessarily, although there have been some incidents here and there. But generally speaking, I just these days people know, people who come to see us play, they know they know what to expect and they're down for it. They want to have that experience. And so it's easy, but it's really just grabbing people's hands and heads and diving into the stage and singing, while I'm in the crowd and just taking, basically when I play live, I'm kind of I hope nothing really tragic happens tonight. That's all I say. But it's the reality is that's part of that's one of the risks I'm taking, and I don't always feel so great about that because it's I don't want to fuck myself up or fuck somebody else up too bad. That has happened in my life, but I also want to have an experience. And, given the kind of band we are, the things we sing about, you have to have the experience. You can't say no to it. So it's every time I play, it's I find myself, I'm summoned to say yes. Something else beyond me summons me to say yes to it. And I do. And so it's physical and interactive, and that's why I think we are, I don't want to sound like too conceited, but like we're a fucking killer live band.
So as we're having this conversation, you're less than a week away from releasing a new album called Inward To Gethsemane through 20 Buck Spin.
Yes.
So when last we spoke last year, you mentioned that there were some riffs and there were some drum patterns for this album, but it didn't sound like much had been finished in terms of songwriting or arranging.
Hmm.
When did you guys actually finish? When did you guys know you had enough to record an album?
Honestly, like we finished. I mean, it's weird because it's hard to say. Like this, the riffs and the songs were finished. Like Layla or Shelby would be a better person to answer this, but like I think very shortly before we recorded, like there were still some changes being made, and then like when it comes to the vocal patterns and the lyrics and stuff, I mean that was written in the studio. Like there was so this was like Shelby was living on the East Coast, and it was hard to get together to actually finish writing the songs or even write them for me when we're all together. So it was to a considerable extent done separately, and then when I got to the studio, that's really when I made my contribution. Did you ask another question tied to that? I can't remember.
No, no, no. I was just curious when the album was actually done from a songwriting perspective.
Yeah, it was done like when the album was when we finished recording the album, basically. Nobody knew what it was going to sound like until we heard it. Yeah, because none of the lyrics and the vocal patterns and stuff had been shared with the band in practice or anything.
And so with Shelby on the East Coast and Layla on the West Coast, was there a lot of file sharing back and forth?
Yeah,
I don't know how involved you were in this process.
there was. Shelby was really great about it. I mean, Shelby like had his songs written like years ago. I mean, he's really like, he writes a lot, and I think he's really adept at working this way because Altar is also a long distance project, and I think he's in a couple others, but he also writes and records a lot of his own music too. So yeah, there was a lot of file sharing, and then Layla shared files, and yeah, that's pretty much how it went.
So you and Layla share lyrical duties, is that correct?
Yeah.
In practical terms, what does that mean? I mean, you're coming up with vocal patterns for yourself, but Layla does vocals as well, right? So
Yeah.
do you guys brainstorm on themes or the direction of the song and then work out your own parts individually?
Yeah. So we brainstormed on themes a bit, like the song that's going to be the Decibel Flexi, Befouled in Self-Salvation. I think that was Layla's attempt to write lyrics that thematically resemble what I had in mind. And I think her other songs are the lyrics that she wrote for the other songs are In Bed with Death, Priapic Chasms. Yeah, those two. And I think those were like related to some of the album themes, but also kind of just lyrics that she wanted to write. So I think that there's a fair bit of freedom in terms of, how closely we need to, we try to make all of the lyrics cohere into like a whole. Like I don't, there is a lot that's conceptual about the album, but I wouldn't say that it's like, a concept album or something like that. So yeah, we work fairly separately. And then in terms of vocal patterns, she that was very collaborative. I had a lot of ideas, and certainly for the songs she wrote lyrics for and the songs that she wrote, she had, pretty specific ideas. So yeah, I think that when we're in the studio, we basically do what we had in mind, but we also try to get as many opinions or as much feedback about it as people want to provide. We're pretty, like, I would say generally, like, the band is, I think we have a lot of strong opinions, and so we can clash because of that. But I think that we also try to hear each other out and are interested in each other's opinions.
But by the time you make your contributions, the song structures are largely set. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like, there are conversations about, like, do you need this part longer for lyrics, or, like, we it generally speaking, though, I would say that because I trust the Shelby's and Layla's compositional skills, I pretty much conform what I write to the songs that they give me. So yeah, they're pretty much written, and then I come up with the lyrics and the patterns. Yeah, which is the final step in our writing process.
Do Shelby and Layla write full songs individually?
Yes.
Would you be able to give me a breakdown of which songs Shelby wrote and which songs Layla wrote?
Yeah. So Layla wrote on this album, she wrote In Bed with Death, Priapic Chasms, and Corpus Fractum. Shelby wrote Stillborn Eternity, Indwelling Archon, Vomitous, and Judas. Yeah. And then, like, they've collaborated on some songs, like Sodomitic Malevolence on Hold Below. The first song on that album is, like, the first part of that song is Layla, and the second is Shelby. And then, yeah, they each, I think, have songs that, like, you on our records, typically, a song Shelby writes will be a single, and a song Layla writes will be a single.
The recording and the production was handled by Greg Wilkinson and Brad Boatwright, who I believe is the same team that worked on the previous Vastum album.
Yeah.
And Greg Wilkinson, I think, has handled the production or the recording of every album except for the very first one.
Mm-hmm.
Did Shelby record his parts remotely?
No, we all recorded in the studio together. Yeah. And by the way, Shelby, I don't even know how necessary it is to say this, but he is no longer in the band. So we are, yeah, currently auditioning new guitarists.
We spoke about Greg Wilkinson when we spoke about Acephalix. His name comes up frequently on this podcast. Considering you've worked with him since the very beginning, is it just a level of comfort?
Yeah, I mean, Greg at this point is like, I mean, his opinion really matters. And I feel like I've learned so much from him recording with him. And, like, I, there's just, I think that we know each other, we're friends, there's a comfort level with each other. I think the bands that I've been in have really grown. He's seen us grow, and we've grown as a result of working with him. And so he offers a lot of really, really helpful ideas. And yeah, so I think that, like, it's hard to imagine working with somebody else. Although on our first two albums, it was with Jeff Leppard. So Jeff recorded the first one. He finished the entire first album, but then the second one, Patricidal Lust, was cut short, his contribution to it, because he passed away. And Greg took over and completed that album, even though it was all tracked at Lennon Studios with Jeff.
Working with Greg this time around, were you looking for him to to do anything specific to your sound? Were you looking to change your sound up at all?
Mm, I think we wanted to like get a little bit. I personally, I felt like Orificial Purge was a bit dry, like atmospherically. Hole Below was very cavernous, so we wanted to let up on that. But I wonder if we kind of overcorrected. So Inward To Gethsemane, I think it is somewhere between the two in that regard, and so we relied on Greg to make that happen. And, I mean, this album is a bit different in some ways. I mean, certainly Corpus Fractum is a very different song for us, or certain, parts of the song are very different. And so Greg, I think, like, he always has ideas, about things to contribute and like how to make things sound compelling. So yeah, but I think that like at this point, because we've worked with them so much, like, and because he's recorded so many death metal bands, like he knows how to get the kinds of sounds that bands like us are looking for. And we pretty much trust him to do that. We weren't going into this with the idea that we would try to make our album sound radically different from albums we've done before. Yeah, the only differences I think we were looking for are the ones I mentioned.
Do you want to say anything about the album art that you created?
It's fucking sick. I mean, I will say that. I really, yeah, I mean, I love it. I love making album covers. It's just so tedious and it's so time consuming and like, but I love it. I feel like it's been a way for me to contribute to the aesthetic of the band, like as I envision it, which is so gratifying, like because, when I see the album cover, it captures a kind of mood that I think I want the music to evoke. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't really, it's like, unless the figures on the cover, they tell less of a story than, or it's not like, I can't tell you exactly what the story is. I know that they tell one, but the reason that they're on there is because of how I feel when I look at their posture or expression or, yeah, the ways that they're using their bodies. And so, the chapel looks great and the stained glass looks great. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really, I think that the lettering in the centers, I don't quite know like why. I guess, I mean, I like the sort of off center. I don't know how to describe the style that I am repurposing or rehashing here is, but it's the same thing on Hole Below, the fonts and the ways that the different lines intersect with each other to spell out the album title. But the rest of the letters, again, it's like the words that come after each other and the way that it's all written and everything. It's like it's like the design is really meant to evoke a feeling. It stems from a feeling. And so it's really nice to be doing something, to be creating something that is literally just doing, like, allowing my mood to dictate my next action. I love that. So, yeah, that's all I'll say about that, I guess.
So by the time people hear this episode, Inward to Gethsemane will be out through $20 bin. Daniel, how can people order the album?
So they can order it on Bandcamp, which, is easy to find, our Vastum Bandcamp. They can also order it on the $20 Spin website. And I think $20 Spin also has some shirts being printed. I think that there's like an LP shirt bundle that a lot of people are probably aware of. In terms of other merch, Vastum has a Store Envy page, so it's vastum.storeenvy.com, and you can find a couple shirt designs, patch, looks like 3 shirt designs, patches, and some other stuff on there. And then there are a few different color variants for the LP. I think that there's like a splatter red variant. And I think that the special $20 Spin variant also has like the LP jacket is like, has I think maybe I've got this wrong, but like there's the jacket's flooded red on the inside. I'm not sure, but and then there's a bone variant and a couple others. I think you might know what they are, yeah?
So I believe that in addition to the regular black version, there's the bone merge, there's one that's red inside on a clear vinyl, and there's a red silver merge.
Sick. Cool.
Which unfortunately I believe may all be sold out by the time people hear this episode. But there's always a secondhand market for you obsessive collectors.
Yeah.
So you did mention that you recorded the song specifically for the Decibel Flexi series. Do you want to say anything about that?
I don't know. I think that it's a great song. I think this album is really strong generally. Like, I'm excited for people to hear it. I'm very into it. The Thousand Self-Salvation, the Flexi was, one of the tracks we recorded, and it was really hard to decide which one we wanted to use for the Flexi because, I think we all liked the songs and felt like the album was really strong, and so it's hard to make that decision. But I don't know quite what to say about it. Shelby wrote it, and I think it was maybe one of the first songs he wrote for this album. I think it might have been, and then Layla wrote the lyrics to that one. Yeah, and I think that lyrically it's about a self-saving God that like how God basically befouls himself by saving himself in the form of Christ. It's like he crucifies himself, which is like total degradation, but that degradation is paradoxically the way that he saves himself too. So I think that's where the concept comes from. But then I think Layla takes the lyrics in a different direction because the concept is actually from this theologian that I talked about a lot on the last Acephalix interview we did, this guy, Thomas Altizer, who wrote about this idea of the self-saving God. Yeah. And the last thing that I will say really briefly about the lyrics on this album is that there are some other, like one of Bataille's teachers, this guy named Lev Shestov, who taught Bataille Nietzsche, was a big inspiration to me for this album. He wrote a paper called Gethsemane Night. And, so that paper was a big part of my creative process for this album, partially where the title comes from, although the title is also a nod to incantation.
Onward to Golgotha?
That's right.
Nice. And if people want to follow Vastum online, what's the best way to do that?
Well, we don't have an Instagram. I think we have a Facebook page. Yeah, we have a Facebook page. I don't know, do people even use Facebook anymore? I have no idea, but you could check it out. Like, it's there. And then there are some like Instagram. We each have our own Instagram handles, our profiles. So you can scour Instagram to find them. Layla's easy to find. I am not.
So, for the second time, you've been extremely generous with your time. But is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. Thanks a lot for the interview. I had a good time talking to you.
And I should say that you are actually working on your dissertation right now. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I realize that you're extremely busy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's good. I enjoy our conversation. I appreciate your questions. And so, yeah, happy to chat with you whenever I have an album coming out. I think the next one might be Decrepicy because I did join that band. And that album's going to be sick. Like, it's very interesting. It's like, I'm really excited about it. And it's written by Kyle, who formed Vastum with me and Layla. So that might be, another opportunity to interview me if you're interested.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Daniel.
Yeah, you take care.